My name is Madison, and I am 28 years old. Last Thanksgiving changed everything I thought I knew about my family. When my mother stood up at dinner and announced that I was the laziest daughter she had ever raised, comparing me unfavorably to my perfect sister Riley for the 100th time, something inside me finally snapped. What happened next exposed a web of lies that had been carefully constructed for over 2 decades, ultimately destroying the very foundation my family was built upon. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this absolutely wild family drama, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. This story gets more shocking with every twist, so make sure you hit that like button and subscribe because you will not want to miss how this all unfolds. Trust me, by the end of this, your jaw will be on the floor. The Thanksgiving dinner had started like every other family gathering for the past decade. Riley arrived fashionably late in her designer dress, fresh from her latest business trip to Milan, while I sat at the table in my nursing scrubs because I had just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital. My mother immediately began fawning over Riley's stories about closing million-dollar deals and her glamorous lifestyle, while barely acknowledging that I had just saved 3 lives during my shift. "Madison, honey, could you help me in the kitchen?" my mother called, which was code for "come do all the work while Riley sits there looking perfect." I had been setting tables, stirring gravy, and washing dishes since I was old enough to reach the sink, while Riley was always too delicate or too important to help with such menial tasks. As I carved the turkey, my mother began her annual comparison speech. "You know, Madison, I really wish you would take some inspiration from your sister. Riley just bought her second condo in Manhattan, and here you are, still renting that tiny apartment and working those exhausting hospital shifts. Sometimes I wonder where I went wrong with you." The words stung, but they were nothing new. What came next, however, crossed a line that had never been crossed before. "Riley has always been the ambitious one," my mother continued, her voice getting louder so the entire table could hear. "She graduated summa cum laude, built her own business empire, and look at her, she is absolutely glowing. Madison, you are 28 years old, and what do you have to show for it? You are the laziest one in this family. Just look at your sister and see what real success looks like." The entire table fell silent. My father stopped mid-chew, my uncle put down his wine glass, and even Riley looked uncomfortable for the first time in years. But my mother was not done. "I mean, honestly, Madison. Riley manages a team of 50 people, travels the world, and still finds time to visit me twice a week. You cannot even remember to call me back half the time. Sometimes I think Riley got all the good genes, and you got whatever was left over." That was it. 28 years of biting my tongue, of being the responsible one, of putting my family first while they treated me like hired help, came crashing down in that moment. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "You want to talk about lazy, Mom? Let me tell you about lazy. Lazy is Riley calling me at 2 in the morning every time she has a panic attack because her perfect life is actually falling apart. Lazy is her asking me to lie to you about why she really missed Dad's birthday last year. And lazy is definitely her having me write her college application essays because she was too busy partying to do it herself." Riley's face went white. "Madison, stop." But I was done stopping. I was done being quiet. I was done protecting everyone else's feelings while mine were trampled on. "Oh, we are just getting started," I continued, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Should I tell everyone about how Riley's successful business is actually funded by money she embezzled from her previous company? Or should we talk about how she has been stealing prescription medications from my hospital badge for the past 2 years? The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was about to consume everything. Riley jumped to her feet. "That is absolutely not true, and you know it." But something in her eyes told me I had hit closer to home than I realized. The panic attack phone calls, the mysterious financial troubles she had mentioned in passing, the way she always seemed to know exactly which medications I had access to at work, pieces of a puzzle I had never wanted to solve suddenly clicked into place. "Really?" I pulled out my phone. Because I have been keeping track of every time my badge was used to access the medication storage when I was not even at the hospital. Care to explain how my access card was used last Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon when I was in the emergency room treating a car accident victim? Riley's confident facade cracked completely. My mother looked confused, switching her gaze between her two daughters as if she was watching a tennis match she did not understand. Madison, what are you talking about? My father finally spoke up. I had never intended for this moment to arrive, but now that it was here, I realized I had been gathering evidence subconsciously for months. Every strange coincidence, every unexplained access to my work credentials, every time Riley seemed to have cash when she had claimed to be broke, I had been building a case against my own sister without even realizing it. Riley has been using my hospital credentials to steal prescription medications, I said, my voice remarkably calm considering the bombshell I was dropping. She somehow got hold of my access information and has been taking pain medications, anxiety medications, and sleeping pills. She then sells them to fund her lifestyle that you think is so successful. The silence that followed was deafening. Riley was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and terror. My mother looked like she might faint, and my father's face was turning an alarming shade of red. "This is insane," Riley whispered. "She is making this up because she is jealous of my success." But I was not done. The floodgates had opened, and everything I had been suppressing for years came pouring out. "Your success." I laughed bitterly. "Riley, I have been covering for you our entire lives. I wrote your high school papers, I lied about why you missed family events, I even helped you cheat on your SATs by creating a distraction during the test. Every achievement you have ever claimed is built on lies, manipulation, and now apparently, actual crimes." The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaos. Riley stormed out of the dining room, claiming she needed air but really needing time to figure out how to spin this disaster in her favor. My mother collapsed into her chair, demanding explanations that no one seemed able to provide. My father sat in stunned silence, probably calculating how much legal trouble his golden child was actually in. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely calm. The truth was finally out, and the weight that had been pressing down on my shoulders for decades suddenly lifted. I excused myself from the table and walked out to the back porch, where I found Riley pacing frantically while talking rapidly into her phone. "I do not care what it costs," she was saying. "Find me a lawyer who specializes in this kind of thing, and find one tonight. My sister is trying to destroy my life with these ridiculous accusations." When she saw me, she ended the call abruptly and whirled around to face me. "What do you want, Madison? Have you not done enough damage for one evening?" I studied her face carefully. Gone was the polished confidence she had worn like armor for so many years. In its place was the same frightened little girl who used to beg me to help her with homework she had not done, to cover for her when she broke Mom's favorite vase, to lie for her when she got caught sneaking out to parties. "I want the truth," I said simply. "All of it." Riley laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "The truth? You cannot handle the truth, Madison. You never could. That is why you have spent your whole life being the good daughter, while I actually lived mine." By stealing from me? By putting my career and my patience at risk? By letting our parents think I was the failure while you committed actual felonies? She was quiet for a long moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was different. Smaller. More honest than I had heard it in years. "Do you know what it is like being the golden child?" she asked. "Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to live up to impossible expectations every single day? Mom and Dad expected me to be perfect at everything, so I became perfect at pretending. That does not excuse what you have done. Does it not?" Her eyes flashed with anger again. "You got to be the sweet, caring daughter who everyone felt sorry for. Poor Madison, working so hard at her noble job, never getting the recognition she deserves. Do you know how easy that role is compared to mine?" I stared at her in disbelief. Even now, caught red-handed in her crimes, she was trying to make herself the victim. "Riley, you stole medications that were meant for people in pain. You used my credentials, which means if you had been caught, I would have lost my license and probably gone to prison. You put my patients at risk. How can you possibly justify that? Because I was desperate, she exploded. My business was failing, I had debts I could not pay, and everyone expected me to keep up this image of success. The medications were just sitting there, and you had access, and it seemed like such a small thing compared to losing everything. A small thing. I could not believe what I was hearing. Riley, what you did was not just theft. It was betrayal of the worst kind. I trusted you with my life, and you used that trust to commit crimes. She started crying then, ugly tears that smeared her makeup and made her look younger and more vulnerable than I had seen her in years. I know, she whispered. I know it was wrong, and I know I hurt you, but I did not know how to stop. Once I started, it felt impossible to go back. And every time Mom compared you to me, I felt worse about it, but I also felt trapped. How could I tell them that their perfect daughter was actually a fraud? For a moment, I felt the old familiar urge to comfort her, to solve her problems, to make everything better like I had been doing our entire lives. But then I remembered the medication logs I had been secretly reviewing, the patients who might have suffered because their pain medication was mysteriously short, the sleepless nights I had spent wondering if I was losing my mind when inventory did not match up. Riley, this cannot continue. I am going to have to report this. Her tears stopped immediately, and the calculating look I knew so well returned to her eyes. No, you're not. Excuse me. You are not going to report anything, because if you do, you will destroy this entire family. Mom and Dad will never recover from finding out their precious Riley is a criminal. It will kill them. And you care too much about their feelings to do that to them. I realized she was right, but not in the way she thought. I did care about my parents' feelings, but I also finally understood that protecting Riley from consequences had never actually helped anyone, including her. You know what, Riley? You are absolutely right. This will devastate Mom and Dad. But you should have thought about that before you decided to steal from sick people using my credentials. The back door opened, and my father stepped onto the porch. His face was grim, and he was holding his phone. Riley, I just got off the phone with my lawyer. He says if what Madison is claiming is true, you could be looking at federal charges for drug theft and identity fraud. Please tell me she is exaggerating. Riley looked back and forth between my father and me, probably weighing her options and calculating her chances of talking her way out of this situation, like she had done so many times before. Daddy, Madison is upset because she thinks I get more attention than she does. She is making up these crazy stories to hurt me. My father's expression did not change. Riley, that is not what I asked. I asked if these accusations are true. The silence stretched between us like a canyon that could not be crossed. Finally, Riley's shoulders sagged in defeat. Some of it might be true, she whispered. The confession changed everything. Within an hour of Riley admitting to some of the accusations, my father had called both his lawyer and my mother's brother, who happened to be a federal prosecutor. What started as a family dinner had become a full-scale investigation, and I found myself at the center of a storm that was about to reshape our entire family dynamic. My Uncle David arrived within 2 hours, still wearing his weekend clothes, but carrying a briefcase and wearing the serious expression he reserved for his most important cases. He sat down with me first, asking detailed questions about the medication thefts, the timeline of when I first noticed discrepancies, and exactly how Riley could have gained access to my credentials. Madison, I need you to understand something, he said after I had finished explaining everything I knew. If what you are telling me is accurate, Riley has not just committed theft. She has committed federal crimes that carry serious prison time. Drug theft from medical facilities is prosecuted very aggressively, especially when it involves someone impersonating medical personnel. The weight of his words hit me like a truck. I had been angry about the betrayal and the lies, but I had not fully processed that my sister could actually go to prison for what she had done. Uncle David, I do not want to destroy her life. I just want this to stop. He nodded sympathetically, but his expression remained serious. I understand, but this is bigger than what you want now. If she has been stealing medications for 2 years, there are patients who may have suffered because their pain management was compromised. There are legal liabilities for the hospital. And if she has been selling these drugs, then we are talking about distribution charges as well. As if summoned by our conversation, Riley appeared in the doorway with my mother close behind. Mom looked like she had aged 10 years in the past few hours, her face puffy from crying and her hands shaking slightly. "David, thank goodness you are here," my mother said. "Please tell me you can fix this." Riley made some mistakes, but she is still my daughter. Riley had clearly spent the past 2 hours crafting her defense strategy because she launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. "Uncle David, I want you to know that Madison is blowing this completely out of proportion. Yes, I borrowed some medications when I was going through a really difficult time in my life, but it was not the elaborate scheme she is making it out to be. I was having panic attacks, I could not afford therapy or medication, and I took just enough to get through some rough patches. I never sold anything, and I certainly never meant to hurt anyone." I stared at her in amazement. Even faced with serious criminal charges, she was still trying to minimize and manipulate the situation. But Uncle David was not buying it. "Riley, if you took medications using Madison's credentials, that is identity theft and drug theft regardless of your reasons. And if you took them repeatedly over a period of years, that establishes a pattern of criminal behavior, not a momentary lapse in judgment." "But I am family," Riley protested. "Surely there is some way to handle this privately without involving courts and prosecutors and ruining everyone's lives." My father, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. "Riley, the question is not whether we can handle this privately. The question is whether you understand how serious this is and what you need to do to make it right." For the first time, Riley seemed to realize that her usual charm and manipulation tactics were not going to work. She looked around the room at faces that were no longer sympathetic to her plight, and I saw something I had never seen before: genuine fear. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice small and defeated. Uncle David pulled out a legal pad and pen. "First, I need a complete confession. Every time you access medications using Madison's credentials, what you took, whether you used the drugs yourself or gave them to someone else, and whether any money changed hands. Second, you need to voluntarily surrender yourself to hospital security and cooperate fully with their investigation. Third, you need to understand that depending on what we find, you may be looking at serious criminal charges that could include prison time." The room fell completely silent. My mother started crying again, but quietly this time, as if she was finally accepting that her perfect daughter was really in serious trouble. "Prison?" Riley whispered. "For borrowing some pills. For stealing controlled substances from a medical facility using fraudulent credentials over a period of years," Uncle David corrected. "Riley, this is not borrowing money from a friend. This is a federal crime that puts patients at risk and undermines trust in our medical system." I watched my sister's face as the reality of her situation finally sank in. All the confidence, all the manipulation, all the entitled expectation that someone else would fix her problems evaporated in the face of actual consequences. "Madison," she turned to me with desperation in her eyes, "you cannot let them do this to me. I am your sister. We have always looked out for each other." The audacity of that statement took my breath away. "Riley, we have never looked out for each other. I have looked out for you our entire lives while you used me for whatever you needed. This is not about revenge or jealousy. This is about the fact that you committed crimes that could have destroyed my career and hurt innocent people. But if you do not testify against me, they cannot prove anything, right?" She was grasping at straws now, looking for any way to escape accountability. Uncle David shook his head. "Riley, the hospital has security footage, access logs, and inventory records. Madison's testimony would be helpful, but it is not necessary to prove your guilt. The evidence speaks for itself." That was the moment Riley finally broke down completely. Not the calculated tears she had used to manipulate people our entire lives, but genuine, ugly crying that came from the realization that her actions had finally caught up with her. "I am so sorry," she sobbed. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to keep up with everyone's expectations, and I made some bad choices, and then it spiraled out of control, and I did not know how to stop." My mother immediately moved to comfort her, but my father held up a hand to stop her. "Riley, being sorry does not undo what you did," he said firmly. "If you are truly sorry, then you will cooperate with the investigation, make full restitution to the hospital, and accept whatever consequences come from your actions." I realized in that moment that my father, who had always been somewhat passive in family conflicts, had finally reached his limit as well. The golden child was about to fall from grace, and there was no one left to catch her. Uncle David closed his legal pad and looked around the room. "I am going to make some calls tonight and set up a meeting with the prosecutor's office for Monday morning. Riley, I strongly suggest you find yourself a criminal defense attorney because this is beyond what I can help you with as a family member." As if the evening could not get any more surreal, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my colleague Sarah at the hospital. "Madison, can you call me? There are some irregularities in the medication logs that the security team wants to discuss with you on Monday." I showed the message to Uncle David, who nodded grimly. "It is starting," he said. "The hospital has noticed the discrepancies and is beginning their own investigation. Riley, your window for voluntary cooperation just got much smaller." The game was truly up now, and there was no going back for any of us. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I had barely slept over the weekend, alternating between reviewing my hospital access logs and fielding phone calls from family members who had heard about the Thanksgiving disaster. My cousin Emma called to offer support, my Aunt Linda wanted gossip, and my grandmother somehow managed to blame me for airing dirty laundry, despite not fully understanding what had happened. At 7 in the morning, I received a call from hospital administration requesting an immediate meeting. By 8, I was sitting in a conference room with the head of security, the chief pharmacist, and the hospital's legal counsel, watching surveillance footage that made my stomach turn. There was Riley, clear as day, using what appeared to be my badge to access the medication storage room on at least 12 different occasions over the past 6 months. The footage showed her moving confidently through areas she should never have had access to, filling her purse with bottles of prescription medications, and even having what looked like casual conversations with staff members who assumed she belonged there. "Miss Taylor," the security chief said, pausing the video on a particularly clear shot of Riley's face, "can you identify this person?" "That is my sister, Riley Anderson," I answered, my voice steadier than I felt. The legal counsel leaned forward. "Miss Taylor, we need to know exactly how she obtained your credentials and whether you were aware of any of these incidents." I spent the next 2 hours walking them through everything I knew, from the first time I noticed medication discrepancies to Riley's confession at Thanksgiving dinner. They took detailed notes, made copies of my phone records showing her late-night panic calls, and asked me to sign a formal statement. "What happens next?" I asked. "We are required to report this to both local police and federal authorities," the legal counsel explained. "Drug theft from medical facilities is a serious federal crime, and we have to protect our patients and our staff. You should know that you are not in any trouble, Ms. Taylor. It is clear from the evidence that you were a victim of identity theft." As I left the hospital, my phone was buzzing with missed calls from Riley. I did not answer. Instead, I drove straight to Uncle David's office, where I found him already meeting with a federal prosecutor named Jennifer Walsh. "Madison, perfect timing," Uncle David said as I entered his office. Agent Walsh was just explaining the scope of the investigation. Agent Walsh was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who spoke with the kind of authority that came from prosecuting serious criminals. "Ms. Taylor, based on the evidence the hospital provided and your statement, we have enough to file federal charges against your sister. However, I wanted to speak with you about the possibility of your sister cooperating with a larger investigation." "What kind of larger investigation?" We have reason to believe that your sister may not be the only person involved in this operation. The medications she stole were high-value controlled substances, and the pattern suggests she was not using them herself, but rather selling them. If she can provide information about her buyers and any network she was part of, we might be able to offer her a plea agreement. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Riley was not just a sister who had made bad choices, she was potentially part of an organized drug distribution network. Agent Walsh, I said carefully, I want justice, but I also want to make sure that patients who needed those medications get proper care. What can you do to ensure that? The hospital is already conducting a review of every patient who may have been affected by the medication shortages. They will receive appropriate medical care and compensation if necessary. Your cooperation in this investigation is helping to protect future patients as well. My phone rang again. This time it was my father. Madison, you need to come home right away. Riley wants to talk to you. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found Riley sitting in the living room with a man I did not recognize who introduced himself as her criminal defense attorney, Marcus Webb. Riley looked like she had not slept in days, her usually perfect appearance replaced by swollen eyes and yesterday's clothes. Madison, Riley began, her voice hoarse. Marcus says that if I cooperate with the investigation, I might be able to avoid prison time. I sat down across from her, studying her face for any sign of the manipulation I had come to expect. But she looked genuinely broken in a way I had never seen before. What kind of cooperation? I asked. Marcus Webb answered. The federal prosecutor believes Riley was part of a larger distribution network. If she can provide information about her contacts and how the operation worked, they might offer her a plea deal that includes restitution, community service, and probation instead of prison time. So you were selling the medications, I said. It was not a question. Riley nodded miserably. I started taking them for my anxiety, but then I met someone who offered to buy the extras from me. It seemed like easy money to help with my debts, and I told myself I was not really hurting anyone since the hospital had so much medication. Who are you selling to? She looked at her lawyer, who nodded encouragingly. There is this guy named Derek who hangs around some of the clubs I go to. He said he had clients who needed pain medication but could not afford to see doctors. I thought I was actually helping people. I felt sick. Riley, those people needed proper medical care, not black market drugs. And the patients at my hospital who were supposed to receive those medications suffered because of what you did. I know, she whispered. I know, and I am so sorry. I never thought about the patients. I was just so focused on my own problems that I did not think about anyone else. For the first time in our conversation, her apology sounded genuine. But I also realized that sorry was not going to fix the damage she had caused. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to forgive me, she said simply. I want you to know that I never meant to hurt you, and I want the chance to make this right. I looked around the room at the faces of my family members, all waiting for my response. My mother was silently pleading with me to show mercy. My father looked resigned to whatever decision I made. Uncle David was maintaining his professional neutrality, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Riley, I said finally, I hope you cooperate fully with the investigation. I hope you get the help you need. And I hope you truly understand how serious this is. But my forgiveness is not going to fix this situation. You have to fix it yourself. She started crying again, but I did not move to comfort her. The time for protecting Riley from the consequences of her actions was over. The next few weeks unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Riley's cooperation with the federal investigation led to the arrest of 6 other people involved in the prescription drug distribution network, including Derek, who turned out to be a mid-level dealer with connections to several hospitals in the area. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly our family drama was front-page news in the metro section. Local nurse's sister arrested in prescription drug theft ring, read the headline that made my stomach drop when I saw it at the grocery store checkout. The article included details about the investigation, quotes from hospital administrators about patient safety, and a photo of Riley being led away in handcuffs after her arraignment. The fallout at work was swift and brutal. Even though I had been cleared of any wrongdoing, my colleagues looked at me differently. Some were sympathetic, understanding that I had been a victim of my sister's crimes. Others whispered in corners about how I should have known what was happening, how I should have been more careful with my credentials, how my family drama had brought negative attention to the hospital. My supervisor, Dr. Martinez, called me into her office on a Wednesday morning 2 weeks after Riley's arrest. "Madison, I want you to know that the hospital administration has complete confidence in your integrity and your work," she began. "However, we need to discuss how this situation affects your position here." My heart sank. "Are you firing me?" "No, absolutely not. But we are going to need to implement some additional security measures around your access to controlled substances. You will need to complete additional training on medication security, and for the next 6 months, all of your medication access will require secondary authorization from a supervising physician." I nodded, understanding that this was actually a very reasonable response considering the circumstances. "Dr. Martinez, I want you to know how sorry I am about all of this. I never intended for my personal situation to affect the hospital. Madison, you were a victim here, not a perpetrator. But we have to take steps to ensure this kind of breach cannot happen again, regardless of the circumstances." The conversation was professional and understanding, but I left feeling like my reputation had been permanently damaged through no fault of my own. That evening, I received a call that made everything worse. "Madison, this is Jennifer Walsh from the prosecutor's office. I need to inform you that Riley's cooperation has uncovered some information that directly involves you." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "It appears that Riley told her contacts that you were aware of and supportive of her activities. She used your reputation as a nurse to legitimize the medications she was selling, claiming that you had verified they were safe and appropriate for her buyer's conditions." I sat down heavily on my couch, feeling like the world was spinning around me. That is completely false. I had no idea she was selling anything, and I certainly never provided any medical advice to anyone she was working with. "We believe you, and Riley has admitted that she lied about your involvement. However, some of her buyers may try to claim that they thought they were getting legitimate medical advice when they purchased medications from her. You may be called to testify in their trials to clarify that you never provided any such advice." The idea that my name and reputation were being used to legitimize drug dealing made me feel physically ill. Even from jail, Riley was still finding ways to drag me into her mess. That weekend, my parents asked me to come to dinner to discuss the situation. I arrived to find that they had also invited my aunt, uncle, and grandmother. Apparently, this was going to be a family tribunal. "Madison," my mother began before I had even sat down, "we need to talk about Riley." "What about her?" "She is facing 5 years in federal prison if she does not get this plea deal," my father said. "The lawyer says your testimony could be crucial in showing that she was just a small player who got in over her head." I looked around the table at my family members, all of whom were looking at me expectantly. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" My grandmother spoke up first. "We are asking you to help your sister. She made some mistakes, but she is still family." "Some mistakes?" I could not believe what I was hearing. "She committed federal crimes over a period of years. She used my identity to steal medications from sick people. She lied about my involvement to drug dealers. These are not mistakes. This is a pattern of criminal behavior." "Madison, please," my mother pleaded. "She is your sister. We have always been a close family, and we have always helped each other through difficult times." "Mom, we have never been a close family. We have been a family where I helped everyone else while my feelings and my needs were ignored. And this is not a difficult time. This is the consequence of Riley's choices." My uncle David, who had been quiet throughout this conversation, finally spoke up. "Madison, no one is asking you to lie for Riley. We are just asking you to consider testifying about her character, about the fact that this behavior was out of character for her." "But it was not out of character," I said firmly. Riley has been manipulating people and avoiding consequences our entire lives. The only difference this time is that she got caught doing something that happens to be illegal. The silence that followed was heavy with disappointment and judgment. I realized that my family had not invited me to dinner to support me through a difficult situation. They had invited me to pressure me into helping Riley avoid accountability once again. I cannot believe you are all sitting here asking me to minimize what Riley did, I continued. She did not just steal from the hospital. She stole from patients who were in pain. She used my name and reputation to legitimize drug dealing. She put my career and my freedom at risk. And somehow, you all think I should help her get out of trouble. My mother started crying. Madison, we are not asking you to help her get out of trouble. We are asking you to help us keep this family together. Mom, this family has been broken for a long time. You just never noticed because you were too busy worshiping Riley to see what was actually happening. I stood up to leave, but my father grabbed my arm. Madison, if you do not help Riley, she could go to prison. Is that really what you want for your sister? I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Dad, what I want is for Riley to face the consequences of her actions so that maybe, finally, she can get the help she actually needs. What I do not want is to spend the rest of my life cleaning up her messes while you all pretend that she is the victim. I pulled my arm free and walked toward the door. When you are ready to have a conversation about how this family actually functions, call me. But I am done pretending that enabling Riley is the same thing as loving her. The trial took place 6 months later, and I did testify, not as a character witness for Riley, but as a victim of her identity theft and a witness to the impact of her crimes on patient care. Sitting in that federal courtroom, watching my sister in her orange jumpsuit, I felt something I had never experienced before, complete emotional detachment from her fate. Riley ultimately received 3 years in federal prison followed by 2 years of supervised probation. The judge noted that while her cooperation had been helpful in dismantling the distribution network, the severity and duration of her crimes required substantial punishment. She would also be required to pay full restitution to the hospital and complete drug rehabilitation programs. As the sentence was read, my mother sobbed loudly in the gallery behind me. My father sat stone-faced, finally understanding that his golden daughter was not the person he had believed her to be. I felt nothing but relief that it was finally over. The months following the trial brought unexpected changes to my life. Without the constant drama of covering for Riley and managing my family's dysfunction, I had energy to focus on my own goals for the first time in years. I applied for and was accepted into a nurse practitioner program that would allow me to advance my career while still working with patients. More importantly, I began building relationships with people who actually valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for them. My colleague Sarah, who had been supportive throughout the entire ordeal, became a genuine friend. We started having regular dinners where we talked about our dreams, our challenges, and our lives without any hidden agendas or manipulation. You know, Sarah said one evening over Thai food, I have watched you transform over the past year. You seem like a completely different person. How so? Before all this happened, you always seemed like you were carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. You were always worried about everyone else's problems, always trying to fix things that were not your responsibility. Now you seem lighter, more present. She was right. For the first time in my adult life, I was not managing anyone else's crisis, covering for anyone else's mistakes, or sacrificing my own needs to maintain family peace. It was liberating in a way I had never imagined possible. My relationship with my parents slowly began to heal, though it looked very different than it had before. My mother struggled with accepting that Riley was not the perfect daughter she had believed her to be, and she went through a period of blaming me for destroying the family. But eventually, with the help of therapy, she began to understand how her favoritism had damaged both of her daughters, Riley by shielding her from consequences, and me by making me feel like I was never good enough. Madison, she said during one of our carefully structured monthly dinners, I owe you an apology that I do not think I can ever fully make. I spent so many years comparing you to Riley that I never really saw who you were or appreciated what you were doing for this family. Mom, I appreciate the apology, but I need you to understand that going forward, our relationship has to be different. I am not going to be the family problem solver anymore. I am not going to cover for anyone or manage anyone else's emotions. She nodded tearfully. I understand. And I want you to know that I am proud of you, not for what you do for others, but for who you are as a person. It was the first time in my life that my mother had ever said she was proud of me without immediately comparing me to Riley or qualifying it with suggestions for improvement. My father's journey was different, but equally important. He had always been somewhat passive in family conflicts, but Riley's crimes forced him to confront his own role in enabling her behavior. He started attending therapy as well, working to understand how his avoidance of difficult conversations had contributed to our family's dysfunction. I realize now that I failed both of you girls, he told me during one of our walks around the neighborhood where I had grown up. I failed Riley by not holding her accountable when she was younger, and I failed you by not protecting you from being parentified. Dad, what matters now is that we are all working to do better. I want you to know that I see you now, Madison. I see how strong you are, how caring you are, and how much you sacrificed for this family. I am sorry it took something this dramatic for me to wake up. Riley and I exchanged a few letters during her first year in prison. Her early letters were full of self-pity and attempts to minimize her actions, but gradually, as she progressed through rehabilitation programs, her tone changed. Her most recent letter was different, more honest, more accountable, and for the first time, truly apologetic. Madison, she wrote, I know that saying sorry will never undo what I did to you, to our family, or to the patients whose care was affected by my actions. I am learning in therapy that I spent our entire lives using you as my safety net, and that was not fair to either of us. I do not expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I finally understand how much damage I caused, and I am committed to becoming a better person. I had not yet decided whether to respond to that letter, but for the first time, it felt like it might be worth considering. The most unexpected gift of this entire experience was discovering what healthy relationships actually looked like. Through new friendships, therapy, and a support group for families affected by addiction, I learned that love did not have to include constant crisis management, that boundaries were not selfish, and that taking care of myself was not only acceptable but necessary. As I sat in my apartment one evening, working on an assignment for my nurse practitioner program, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I was no longer the exhausted people-pleaser who absorbed everyone else's problems. I was no longer the responsible daughter who sacrificed her own happiness to maintain family harmony. I was simply Madison, a skilled nurse, a dedicated student, a loyal friend, and a person worthy of respect and love without having to earn it through service to others. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dinner tomorrow? I have news about the promotion I applied for. I smiled as I typed back, absolutely. I will bring dessert to celebrate. For the first time in my life, I was part of relationships based on mutual support, genuine care, and equal give and take. It was what family should have felt like all along. Sometimes justice does not look like dramatic courtroom victories or public vindication. Sometimes justice looks like finally understanding your own worth, setting boundaries that protect your peace, and building a life filled with people who value you for exactly who you are. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply refusing to play the game anymore and discovering that you are worthy of love without having to earn it through suffering. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you experienced that moment when you realize that protecting someone from consequences is actually hurting them? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can do for others. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. Until next time, take care of yourselves and know that you deserve relationships that lift you up rather than drain you dry.